Why do you always make cat whiskers on your face? What does a giraffe sound like?
Alright, let's get this over with.
Yep.
Are Dan and Phil in a relationship?
Yes.
Alright, bye.
16 years. That's how long the internet has been asking one question. Are Dan and Phil dating? After all the Tumblr theories, the edits, the evidence compilations, and the debates that could split a fandom in two, the answer finally came. In October 2025, Dan Howell and Phil Lester looked straight into the camera and said it. Yes, we're in a relationship, and the internet imploded in the best way possible. It wasn't just a reveal, it was closure. The end of a 16-year guessing game that started back when the biggest scandal on YouTube was someone faking a jump cut. This wasn't just two creators confirming a rumor, it was the internet finally getting an answer to a mystery it had basically raised itself on. But how did two awkward British guys accidentally become one of the most mythologized couples in YouTube history? How did we get from a couple of shy vlogs filmed on a potato-quality camera to a cultural moment that stopped Twitter, TikTok, and Tumblr in their tracks? Let's unpack it. So, who exactly are Dan and Phil? Before they became the internet's favorite mystery, they were just two guys making videos in their bedrooms. Phil Lester, aka Amazing Phil, joined YouTube in 2006 when the site looked more like a MySpace side project than a global platform. He was wholesome, quirky, and slightly chaotic in a drinks tea mid-sentence kind of way. Then, in 2009, along came Dan Howell, aka Dan is Not on Fire. Dry humor, emo fringe, existential dread. He was every Tumblr user's inner monologue come to life. They met the same year. Literally the day they met, they filmed together. 1 minute, strangers. The next, creating internet history. From that day on, they were inseparable, making content, touring together, hosting radio shows, and basically building a YouTube empire out of British sarcasm and cozy jumpers. And that's when the whispers started. Are they just best friends? Are they roommates? Are they soulmates who happen to own matching mugs? Whatever it was, the internet decided to give it a name. Fan. If you were on Tumblr in 2012, you remember. Fan wasn't just a ship name, it was a full-blown religion. People were analyzing eye contact like it was courtroom evidence. You'd open your dashboard and see black and white gifs of Dan and Phil staring at each other, overlaid with Arctic Monkeys lyrics. There were master posts. There were fan theories longer than college theses. There were slow-motion edits called proof. And then came the legendary Valentine's Day video, the holy grail of fan lore. Rumor has it, in 2010, Phil uploaded a private video meant for Dan, a heartfelt love confession that accidentally went public for a few hours before being deleted forever. To this day, no one's confirmed what it really was. But that didn't matter. In the eyes of the fandom, it was the lost scroll of the fan religion, the moment that turned two friends into a full-blown myth. But fame is a double-edged sword. The more popular they got, the more invasive the speculation became. They weren't just being shipped, they were being surveilled. Fans dissected every glance, every touch, every pause. People were freezing frames to analyze hand placement like it was the Zapruder film. And while it was all born out of love, it also became exhausting. Dan later admitted, "We never called it anything. We just ended up living together, and here we are." The internet turned their friendship into fan fiction, and their real lives into theory threads. By the mid-2000s, Dan and Phil were household names. Best-selling authors, radio hosts, arena tour headliners. But behind the smiles, they were tired. You could see it in the way they dodged questions, the way they joked about privacy without ever giving too much away. They didn't want to lie, but they also didn't want their relationship to become public property. Then came 2019. Dan dropped his emotional coming-out video. Basically, I'm gay. It wasn't clickbait. It was raw, vulnerable. He talked about shame, fear, and how fame can make identity feel like a performance. A few weeks later, Phil came out too, in his own charmingly awkward way. But even then, neither said the words the internet had been waiting for. For fans, it was a soft confirmation. But they were protecting something real in a space that can turn real things into content overnight. Dan later said, "We didn't want our work to become about that." And honestly, we were scared. And who could blame him? The internet's obsession with fan wasn't always kind. It blurred boundaries, turned affection into evidence, and love into entertainment. Then, after years of silence, came October 13th, 2025, the day the internet collectively gasped in unison. Dan and Phil uploaded a video titled, "Is Fan Real?" It opens with Dan saying, deadpan, "Let's get this over with." Phil says, "Yep." Dan asks, "Are Dan and Phil in a relationship?" Phil answers, "Yes." Boom. 16 years? Vindicated. The internet went nuts. You could feel the nostalgia ripple through every corner of social media. Old Tumblr accounts got reactivated just to scream, "I knew it." Fan edits with 2012 clips resurfaced. Twitter trended fan confirmed worldwide, and because they're Dan and Phil, they immediately made it funny. Dan laughed and said, "You wanted the tea, the blood, the tears." They joked about filming the day they met. Wouldn't recommend that. They admitted they were weird, messy, and not the perfect couple people imagined. "If you're a mess, we're a mess," Phil said, and that's what made it so good. They didn't glorify it, they didn't perform it, they just told the truth. But why now? Why wait 16 years? According to BBC, People, and E! Online, it came down to privacy. They wanted to do it on their terms, not because the fandom demanded it, but because they finally felt ready. They didn't want to be reduced to the gay YouTubers. They wanted to be people first, creators second, a couple third, and honestly, it worked. By waiting, they didn't just protect their relationship, they preserved it. Their reveal hit differently because it wasn't just for fans. It was for every creator who's ever felt trapped between authenticity and self-preservation. It was a quiet rebellion against a system that treats personal lives as public property. But it also hit differently because it wasn't just about them. It was about us, the audience that grew up with them. The fans who watched in middle school, stayed through high school, and are now watching from office desks holding coffee mugs, realizing an era just ended. Fan wasn't just a ship. It was a snapshot of what the internet used to be. Messy, obsessive, deeply emotional, but full of connection. It was that golden age when fandom felt like a secret club, when Tumblr was our world, and when two awkward British guys accidentally became our comfort show. Now, they're relaunching their joint channel, doing non-gaming content, being themselves without the need for speculation or mystery. Dan even said, "There are still going to be boundaries." And that's fair. There should be. In the end, it just feels so poetic. The fandom that once couldn't respect boundaries now celebrates them. The kids who once wrote fanfics about them are now adults tweeting, "I'm so proud of them." It's not just confirmation, it's growth. Dan and Phil didn't just survive YouTube, they outlasted it. They outlasted trends, scandals, algorithm changes, and an entire generation of creators who came and went. And through it all, they kept their bond intact. So yeah, Fan was real all along. Not because fans guessed right, but because Dan and Phil found a way to build something real in a world that thrives on fake. They didn't just confirm a relationship, they confirmed that privacy, patience, and authenticity can still win on the internet. And if you were part of that era, congratulations! You just lived long enough to see fandom fanfiction turn into canon. Love wins, rumors lose, and sometimes the best stories take 16 years to tell.